personalities that matter with Keith Vaz on Talking Points.
Like a radio.
My special guest today is one of the most accomplished members of the Indian Parliament. Suresh Prabhu has been the Union Minister for Commerce, Civil Aviation, Railways, Chairperson of the Task Force for the Interlinking of Rivers, Union Minister for Power for the Indian Government. If that was not enough, he has recently been appointed as the Prime Minister's Sherpa to the important G7 and G20 forums. He currently sits in the Rajya Sabha representing the state of Andhra Pradesh, which has a population of over 49 million people. Despite his incredibly busy schedule, he joins me this morning from New Delhi. Good afternoon, Suresh Prabhu.
Afternoon. It's a great honor to be speaking to such a distinguished person like yourself, who is respected not only in UK where you represented in the parliament, but also in India, and you have a huge following in India about the great work that you have been doing for the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Suresh. And so does you. This is going to become the Mutual Admiration Society because, as I've pointed out, you have done so much for international work. I want to start, if I may, about the current situation regarding COVID in India. We are all desperately concerned because we have a special place in our hearts for India. What's the situation like at the moment?
You know, the second wave was quite severe, more than the first one. And obviously, there have been more sufferings as a result of the second wave than the first one. And then it came so suddenly and with so much of force that all the infrastructure that we have created infrastructure for healthcare to deal with a normal situation. But this was an extraordinary situation. And therefore, we dealt with it. Thanks to the Prime Minister's leadership, he is actually personally driving it. And now the situation is coming under control. We had passed a number of cases beyond 400,000 at given part of time. Now they're coming below 300,000 per day, which again is a large number, but there has been a marked improvement. I think it looks like, I hope so, that we have peaked. And therefore, some states and some part of that state is showing some concern. So we are focusing on those geographies and try to attack a particular level so that hopefully we should be able to control it in the next few weeks' time.
Now, everyone is commenting on the fact that the first wave was handled so well. The number of cases from India was very, very low. Many are saying that the big religious festivals, possibly the election campaign, possibly people just not heeding the advice of the government to stay at home has contributed to the second wave. Is it difficult in a country like India to be able to tell people what to do? And that has in fact led to what's happened with the second wave. People have just not listened.
No, actually, as we know, the first virus we started mutating and we started assuming different roles has always been a challenge, even during the Spanish flu. So we have to deal with that. Therefore, we are actually trying to vaccinate as many people as possible. There are obviously, India being 1.4 billion people currently, has a huge population and therefore some religious, cultural activities as well as certain constitutional responsibilities of holding elections are something which is inevitable part of the process. But we actually are working on it, trying to respond to it with full force. And in India, the health is a divided responsibility between state governments and the federal government. So we are trying to mobilize both state and federal government resources, as well as using the support of the international community, which is really thankful to them for pouring in such a great support, not only in terms of material, but in terms of emotional support, of friendship that they are trying to display during these difficult times is really, really appreciable, and we like to put it on record. So gratitude for that.
Now, one of the achievements of the administration in the last few years is to concentrate on the production of pharmaceuticals. In many ways, India is regarded as the pharmacy of the world. You were very generous in sending a lot of your vaccines out. Obviously, people bought them. You didn't send them out free. Do you think that instead of sending them out, India needs to keep more of its vaccinations and vaccinate more of its people and stop this open approach that you've got at the moment?
You know, as you know, India is the largest producer of vaccine in the world. But some of the IPRs for the vaccine came from some other country like UK, for example, whereas one vaccine was developed within the country. Because we have acquired the IPRs from overseas, we had certain international obligation to also supply those vaccines to other countries of the world. But of course, we never made it in a way that Indians should suffer because of that. So it was a very fine-tuning balance between our international obligations as well as domestic responsibilities. And we are trying to match both with the same vigor as it is necessary. We always care for the global population because, as you know, this is one virus if it is not finished everywhere at the same time, it will keep recurring somewhere or the other. And as you have seen now, more than 200 geographies in the world are affected by this virus today, as per the WHO's own statistics. That means if it happens someplace, it happens all over. So we have to take care of the whole world as a whole to deal with this pandemic. And India, being a responsible citizen of the world, we feel that we must fulfill our international obligation as well as caring for our own people, because that's a primary responsibility.
This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Suresh Prabhu, one of the most accomplished members of the Indian Parliament and the Prime Minister of India's Sherpa to the G7 and G20 forums. We're going to take a break and we're going to be coming back to ask about his life in politics and India's place in the world. Join us after the break. Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Suresh Prabhu, a member of the Rajya Sabha and the Prime Minister of India's representative to the G7 and G20 forums. Suresh, when you started your education, your younger life, you seemed to be on the path to becoming the Chief Justice of India. You were a lawyer, not a politician. You've got an LLB in law, but then you switched to finance. What made you change at that very young age?
I did my law because I was passionate about studying law and wanted to practice as a lawyer. But my father was somehow very keen that I should be a chartered accountant. And he prevailed upon me to be CA. But he always said that if you want to pursue LLB, you can do both at the same time. So I pursued both the degrees at the same time. And then I became chartered accountant. At the same time, I became the youngest ever chairman of the largest cooperative bank, which in fact, I was age of 31, I became the chairman of the largest cooperative bank in the country. And therefore, my interest in finance grew, interest in banking grew. And as a practicing chartered accountant, which I could practice only as either CA or as a lawyer, so I started practicing as a chartered accountant, and that's how I got into the finance. But law has been a great interest to me. In fact, for some time, I also taught law in one of the law colleges in Mumbai, but that was part-time. But I was very keen in both law, finance, accounting, auditing, and many other subjects. But this is my one passion and one was my profession. So I had to do both at the same time.
So, but also you had an interest, even at that very early stage, in climate change. This is years ago. You didn't even imagine that one day you'd be the Sherpa for the G7 and G20 when they are dealing with climate change. You got 2 PhDs in energy and the environment. Why were you so interested then? Because it wasn't a fashionable subject at that stage.
Firstly, my interest in climate change started when I became the Minister of Environment in 1998, when Prime Minister Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. So I had 6 cabinet positions under Prime Minister Vajpayee and had 4 cabinet positions under Prime Minister Modi. So when I was a Minister of Environment and Forest, I started studying the subject of climate change. And then I realized that it's the biggest threat to humanity, not just to one particular sector or one particular country, and not just to humanity, to the entire biological life. And then I started taking interest. Incidentally, I am one of the co-founders of an organization called GLOBE, which is Inter-Parliamentary Union, which had a headquarters in House of Commons, of which you have been a distinguished member. And therefore, I realized that unless we work together as a world community, we'll not be able to address the climate change problem. Let me clarify. These 2 PhDs I'm still pursuing. I've not yet got the full PhD dissertation. I didn't find time to do that, though I completed it. But I got a lot of honorary PhDs, including one from University in Peru, Loyola University in Peru in Latin America. So I got quite a few of those. But I not completed my studies in climate change PhD, as well as in another economics PhD, which I'm doing from University of Mumbai. And climate change PhD, in fact, I was doing from Freie University Berlin, very close to you. So I feel that unless we also provide a strong academic support to policy making, we'll not be able to succeed as a good policy maker, as a particularly driving your country's needs. So I feel that each one of us may not be doing formal PhDs, but must study the subject in depth so that we can come out with scientific solutions to the problems the world is facing today.
Now, one final question on this. I noticed that your hobbies include philately, and this is probably because you've been to so many countries in the world. You just talked about getting an honorary degree from Peru. How big is your collection? And if you had a favourite stamp, what would that stamp be?
I've been to maybe 170, 180 countries in the world over a period of last few years. And that is because of, even as a student, I should travel. I was involved with a lot of NGOs. Today, even I'm involved with more than 150 organizations, some of which global. And I, therefore, have always been a passion. So one of the interests is reading and music. I love music. Of course, I love to play chess, also table tennis. But I love music a lot. And I cannot say I'm an expert in music. If you ask me a particular note and say what it means, I will not be able to say that. But I enjoy it. I really like music of all kinds. So favorite pastime is either reading or music, obviously travel. But even I'm traveling, I'm reading or listening to the music. So you can say three at the same time, reading, music and travel.
This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Suresh Prabhu, who has held 10 ministerial posts in the Indian government and is currently the Prime Minister's representative, his Sherpa, at the G7 and G20 forums. When we come back, we're going to be talking about his ministerial career and India's place in the world. Join us after the break. Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Suresh Prabhu, who is one of the most accomplished members of the Indian Parliament. We're going to talk about the 10 ministerial posts that he's held under Prime Minister Vajpayee and now under Prime Minister Modi. Suresh Prabhu, when you were the Union Minister for Commerce and Industry, domestic manufacturing at a local level reached $5 trillion US. How did you manage to achieve that in such a short space of time?
We must realize one thing, that the manufacturing globally has changed the way it is made over a period of time. Now we are becoming part of global value chains, global supply chains. So nothing gets manufactured as a whole at one particular place. Some components are manufactured somewhere else, some intermediate are manufactured in some other place, and finally it gets assembled into third place. So India must position to find out its relative advantages, its relative strengths, and therefore must focus on part of that value chain. If not entirely, even part of it will make a significant addition to India's own manufacturing capabilities. We have about 16% of our total share to GDP comes from industry. We have to take it to at least 20%. So when we are talking about $5 trillion economy, 20% of that means almost $1 trillion should come from industry over a period of time. So we prepared a detailed plan as to what is that can be manufactured in India, which can contribute to that 20%. And what is the advantage that India enjoys in doing that? What kind of policy changes we need to do that? And I'm very happy to see that we have made some progress on that. Recently, Prime Minister announced a new production-linked incentive scheme, which will again lead to manufacturing of certain specific products in India and will have an advantage over them. But you are absolutely right in saying that challenges are many, because India is not the only country which is seeking destination for manufacturers to come to India, but there are many others who are competing with us. So we'll have to all constantly keep upgrading our capabilities, also try to be competitive, increase our human resource, make infrastructure far, far better, bring ease of doing business in line with what the international community is interested in.
But of course you started that process, and in those days it was very difficult to get people to invest in India. India was regarded very much as a closed shop. How do you think you've managed, and the government has managed, the current government, to basically open up India, to encourage more investment in India, especially for the NRIs who sometimes complain that perhaps there's a little too much red tape?
No, you're absolutely right that we have to attract investment from outside India, because the domestic savings rate will not be sufficient to put in the investment, because if you don't have savings you cannot make investment. So domestic savings may not be sufficient about the type of investment that we need in India. So getting foreign investment either through non-resident Indians or from foreign institutional investors or from foreign direct investors has to happen in a proper way. Each of those three segments are different. Portfolio investors will look at different ways, NRIs will look at different ways, and the FDI will look at different ways. So we are relaxed investment into FDI in a significant way, looking at each and every sector properly. Recently, the Parliament passed a new law which allowed insurance companies to invest into Indian insurance business beyond the previous ceiling, and now it is possible that they can invest more. So it is all the time and continuous effort. But you're absolutely right. One is how to make investment possible in India. One, to change the reality, and also to change the perception. Because you can know the reality because only when you start doing business. But you're not doing business based on perception. So both must change at the same time. The perceptions will actually probably give you a wrong impression, but when you come to India, you'll realize, it's not really bad as it was made out to be. But so changing both at the same time is very important. Perceptions and the reality. So reality has to happen on the ground. Perceptions will happen by way of engaging with people. Actually, I did same thing at the same time.
Now, I'm going to just ask you one final question about your ministerial career. You've had 10 jobs, I know, but I would imagine one of your favourite was being the Railways Minister. Do you think that Indian Railways have a romantic connotation to people who live in the UK? What more can we do to increase the infrastructure of Indian Railways? Because it must have been a really, really tough job, but people don't understand. It is actually one of the most important jobs in the Indian cabinet to be the Railways Minister, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. See, the railways transported 8.1 billion people in a year. So that means more than global population because of the round trips. So you can imagine the volume. You can also imagine that there is the largest employer in the world. One of the largest is Indian Railways. Of course, NHS, National Health Service in UK, is also one of the large employers. But we have almost 13 million people, 1.3 million people who work for the railways. So it's a very large organization. So we want to revitalize the railways. So as a railway minister, I presented the first full railway budget of the Modi government, and I made about $146 billion plan for investing into the railways. Because we realize if we don't make that over a period of time, railways will be languishing because we are losing share to the road. Because roads we are investing more, railways we are investing less. And to do that, I decided to raise resources from unconventional sources like borrowing from insurance funds and others. We also decided to create non-fare revenue directorate to raise non-fare revenue to 30%. And the UK railways have done phenomenally well in doing that. After you privatized it, you could raise non-fare revenue significantly. If you don't have non-fare revenue, then you are relying only on two sources of revenue. One is fare and one is freight, which is not sufficient. We should not allow you to have put money back into the railways as investment. So we actually changed the entire perception. Also, we changed railways as customer-driven organization. So you'll be surprised that though so many people travel by railways, this is the only organization in the world, I can say in the world, wherein I started a practice that while you are still traveling on the train, if you make a complaint, it will be redressed immediately. You are still on the plane. And this was the biggest ever exercise ever carried out anywhere in the world of redressing complaints at the same time as you're traveling. So this is a massive thing we try to do. We are trying to modernize the railways. We started new coaches, many things. So it was a very pleasurable experience, at the same time most challenging one at the same time.
You are making me very, very nostalgic for India. We can't travel there at the moment, but as soon as we get there, I'm going to go on one of your trains. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Suresh Prabhu, the Prime Ministers of India's Sherpa for the G7 and G20 forums and the holder of 10 ministerial offices in Indian history. We're going to come back for our final bit, which is going to be about India in the world. Join us after the break. Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm having a fascinating conversation with one of India's most senior political figures, Suresh Prabhu, the holder of 10 ministerial offices and currently the Prime Minister's representative to the G7 and G20 forums. Suresh Prabhu, you've met a lot of global leaders. You've had to sit down and you've had to argue India's case at the conference table. Which of the global leaders has most impressed you? You can't include Prime Minister Modi because he's your boss. Tell me anyone else who you've been really impressed with on the international stage, any of the prime ministers or ministers.
Of course, President Obama was the most impressive one. I had met him when he was a senator, and soon thereafter he became the president. So I met him again as a president, but not that long. But of course, I spent time with him, and I've been very, very impressed with him because he's the one who really understands the issues of people. So he's a people's president. Therefore, I was very, very impressed with him. So was, of course, Bill Clinton. When he came to India, we could meet him, and he was a person, when you meet him, he feels like he has come all the way only to meet you. That's the impression he gave it to everybody to whom he met. So that's an amazing personality. Of course, I had a very good relationship with Prime Minister Tony Blair. Yeah. And again, I have a great regard for him. But I could meet so many of them in different parts of the world, and has been always been very interesting to meet such people because you can learn a lot from them, even if you spend little time with them, because that's the greatness of those people. So therefore, of course, Prime Minister Abe is another great person, for the Prime Minister of Japan, ex-Prime Minister of Japan. He's another great person whom I have got a great regard for. Therefore, I think each one of them brings on table so many great things, including Chancellor Merkel, who is another great leader. I think one of the finest leaders, and always gives an impression as if she's not a leader. That's a great attribute of a leader. So she's really a great person to know her.
When you shake your hands with these people and you make a deal, we hear all about international deals. How do you know that those countries are going to keep their word? Do you have a secret list in your head about people who say yes to you at these international forums and do what they say, and those who say yes to you and don't do what they say? Is there a kind of secret list that is kept by you?
So, this is actually, whether it's international relationship or domestic relationship or personal relationship, it is very important that you have to be honest with each other. Whenever you are trying to make a deal with somebody, if the counterparty is not sincere or serious about what you want to do. When I was a trade minister, I had to deals with so many different countries at the same time, talk to them all the time. And then I realized that first thing I will do is I will never overpromise. And I will be very honest with myself about my country's priorities and tell them very frankly that this is possible. At the same time, understand the priorities of the other side, because you can never make a deal which is not win-win. If you feel that it's my way or highway, it is never going to happen. So you must always make sure that both the parties to the deal or all the parties to the deal, sometimes it's multilateral, always you must take everybody's concern and everybody's interest on board. I had 2 mini ministerial I chaired in India on WTO. Prime Minister Modi is a great negotiator in terms of ensuring that he understands world very well, he understands India's concerns properly, and therefore I think his guidance is very, very useful while dealing with such challenges.
Now, you mentioned India's place in the world. You are one of the very few Indian MPs. You've been a minister, a member of parliament for so many years. You travel the world. You've been to 180 countries. But many people believe that India, as a superpower, should be doing more internationally, influencing the Security Council more and doing other things. Is it because it's just such a big country with so many problems that the Prime Minister cannot focus on world affairs? When is India going to actually take its rightful place at the very top table of international affairs, alongside the Russians and the Americans?
We always believe that India has to be a responsible global citizen and therefore must be a part of a solution and never should be the cause of a problem. And therefore we try to work with all the countries in the world to ensure that we provide our own perspective about global issues and try to address them also. For example, India provides largest number of people for the United Nations peacekeeping force. So we feel that we have to do that and we provide that. Again, in case of pharmaceuticals, in case of IT, we are the ones who are trying to come forward and doing that. You'll be surprised to know, and your own native place back home in Goa, India is responsible for more than 20% of the global seafarers of the world come from India. More than 20%. So in fact, right now, because of the pandemic, the entire global trade is worried because 80% of the global trade happens through the sea. And 20% of the seafarers are from India. You can imagine the importance of that. So we are actually providing to the extent possible the support to them. In fact, the Indians who are working abroad, and the one example of that is that they send back $80 billion a year. India is the single largest recipient of remittances. What does it mean? That so many people working abroad, they may be sending money back, but they are working abroad to provide some services. So the Middle East in India, in the world, is actually being run to great extent by Indians. So we are doing our bit. We never claim to be a superpower, which we should not be a superpower, but we should be a responsible power. And we should work with everybody to solve the global problems, whether it is climate change, whether it is security, whether it is terrorism, whether it is global financial needs, whether it is related to social issues. We must be part of the solution, work with all the countries in the world and provide our necessary assistance so that global issues will be addressed together.
I have a final question about your very important work on the G7 and the G20. How much is this a priority for the Indian government? Because we've heard that, unfortunately, Prime Minister Modi can't come to London to attend this very important conference because of the crisis in India at the moment. Is it a priority for him? Do you feel you have his backing in the work that you do?
India always engages with all multilateral forums. We very strongly feel that multilateralism is the only way we can address global problems. And therefore, we engage with all forums, whether United Nations bodies or others. So G20 is a very important forum because they are the 20 largest economies of the world. And because they account for more than 80% of the global GDP, it is very important that the economic clout of these countries is put for a better use to solve the global problem. So we are part of that. In fact, India will be hosting the G20 for the first time in 2023, when India will be holding the presidency for a year. So we are really looking forward to that.
Suresh Prabhu, Member of Parliament, Minister, Internationalist, because that's what you are. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us on Leica Radio this afternoon. Could we pass on through you to the Indian government and the Indian people the concerns of the people of the United Kingdom, especially the listeners of Leica Radio? We know you are in a very tough struggle with a world pandemic, and we wish you all the very best of luck in what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the sentiments. It's a very invaluable support for us. We'll really take those on board and we'll make sure that we cure ourselves and also save the world from a pandemic. Thank you very much. God save you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Suresh Prabhu.